I'm Dr. Deb Butler, and you are listening to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is episode number 500! Exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. Stay tuned. Welcome to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is Dr. Deb Butler, Master Life and Weight Coach, and as always, your coach. If you're a woman and you're smart and you're successful and you've been struggling with weight your whole life and now menopause is making it harder than ever, and you are ready to make this the last time you ever have to go on a diet again, then this podcast is for you. Stay tuned. Hello, all my dear friends all over the world. Well, today is a special day because today I'm recording my 500th episode. 500. Over 2 million downloads. I can hardly believe it. And so I wanted to do something special and kind of go through a reflection of all of these episodes and all of these years of doing them. I've lived in Belize some of the time. I've had 3 grandchildren that I talked about ad nauseum as I was going through it. There are so many things that have happened to me while I was talking to you, and it's all in these podcasts. But what's most important that I thought would be wonderful to be able to reflect on is to play some excerpts over the years on some of my main tools that I've used for over 9 years that have helped thousands and thousands of women learn how to have peace with food and peace with their bodies. And that is the tools of, number 1, and most important, self-compassion. I've done so many episodes on self-compassion, so I thought I would put in at least an excerpt of one of my podcasts on self-compassion. I'd love to talk about mindfulness and how to be aware of your thinking. I've done episode after episode of mindfulness and to know what you're thinking and to know what you're thinking before you put food in your mouth. I've talked a lot about the hunger scale. Do you know when you're hungry? Do you know when you're full? Episode after episode of that. I'd love to include that into this. And of course, emotionals, your emotional hunger scale. Why do you eat when you're not hungry? And it has everything to do with your emotions, your emotional hunger scale, and those emotional holes. So I want to make sure that there's an excerpt from all of the years of doing it to help you remember all about the emotional hunger scale and the different types of eating. Why do you eat? Do you eat to fuel yourself? Are you just joy eating, putting foods in your mouth that have no nutritious value where you're not mindful about it? Or have you learned how to be able to do a proper joy eat? That means a food that has no nutritious value, but you can eat it bite by bite and mindfully stop the minute you're through enjoying it. How about an excerpt on that? There are so many different podcasts that I've done over the years, and I've said it in so many different ways. And some of the ways that I say it help one person, and some of the ways that I've said it have helped another person. So today, these are some of my very favorite excerpts from all of my 500 podcasts. Now, of course, not 500 excerpts, but some of my favorites from all 500 episodes are here for you to listen to. So hopefully it'll help you with emotions, and it'll help you understand your hunger scale, and it'll help you have more compassion for yourself, and it'll help you become more mindful about what's going on around you without judgment. It's kind of the Buddhist way of eating, you could say. I have brought the Buddhist philosophy into the everyday thing of eating. So whatever you do when you listen to my podcast, today I want you to be a little bit more comfortable, and I want you to put on your listening ears a little bit better because it's years worth of different excerpts and great ideas of the best of my last 500.
I want to show you how you can use self-compassion. And so Kristen Neff explains in her book on the joy of self-compassion, she talks about open-heartedness. And I just want to read you a little bit about what she wrote. And then I want to talk about a few different techniques that you can use to help yourself feel better, how to give yourself compassion. So this is what she says about open-heartedness, which is a part of self-compassion. When we give ourselves compassion, we are opening our hearts in a way that transforms our lives. What does it mean to be open-hearted? It's a phrase that we use all the time, but what does it actually mean? Open-heartedness is a state of emotional receptivity in which even unpleasant or negative experiences are held with caring concern. When we kiss the boo-boo on a child's hurt finger, or listen empathetically to a dear friend telling us their woes, when we feel compassion, in other words, we experience an inner warmth spreading out from the center of our chest. This feeling is what lets us know that our hearts are open. I really want you to hear that. That warm feeling that you're feeling throughout your chest is a way to let you know that your heart is open. And how does it feel to have an open heart? Pretty darn good. When compassion is flowing through our veins, we feel at our vibrant best, connected, alive, plugged in. When we unlock our hearts, new experiences are free to emerge. Experiences of love, courage, and unlimited possibility. When our hearts are closed, however, we remain unmoved by life's sorrows. As we shut out the pain, we also shut ourselves down. Our fear of being overwhelmed by negative emotions leads us to tune out so that we feel only constriction in the center of our chest. See, she's talking about what happens when you resist negative emotion. And you know I've been talking all about allowing negative emotion. So what she goes on to say is the price paid for protecting our hearts is to cut off our very lifeblood. We feel cold, empty, unhappy, and deeply unsatisfied. And the time when our hearts are most likely to close is when our pain is caused by negative self-judgment, when we feel we aren't good enough in some way. We often incredibly callous when we are relating to our own inadequacies and imperfections, meaning that much of the time we're slamming the door of our heart right in our own face. Fortunately, when we decide to hold our flawed humanity with compassion, everything changes. By responding to our own pain with a sense of kindness and connection, by soothing and comforting ourselves when faced with the imperfection of ourselves or our lives, we are creating new positive emotions that weren't there a moment earlier. Instead of just feeling inadequate, we now both feel inadequate and connected in remembering the shared aspect of the human experience. Instead of just feeling sadness, we now both feel sadness and the sweet tenderness of concern for a wound that needs healing. I'm interjecting right here. She's relating to this as I was speaking to you about a child that's in pain and how you work with that. And that's what she's talking about now, except it's you. Instead of just feeling inadequate, we now both feel inadequate and connected in remembering the shared aspect of the human experience. Instead of just feeling sadness, we both now feel sadness and the sweet tenderness of concern for a wound that needs healing. Instead of just feeling frightened, we now both feel frightened and comforted by our own kindness and caring. By relating to ourselves with compassion, we are holding our negative emotions in the warm embrace of a good feeling. And this means that hidden with every moment of anguish lies the potential for contentment, Pain can become the doorway to happiness because feeling loved, cared for, and connected is what makes us truly happy. This episode is a lot more about just learning from your body when to start eating and when to stop eating, and to recognize if something gets in the way of those numbers. So what I want you to do is to imagine in your mind a scale, and that scale goes from a -10 to a +10. A -10 is when you're starving, and a +10 is when you are stuffed. And my best scenario of a +10 used to be on Thanksgiving. A +10 to me means I had to take my clothes off. I was hot, I was full, I was grumpy, but I had to take my clothes off. I had to unzip my dress. I had to unzip my pants. +10. A -10, probably not many of us have been there, but I guess if you've starved yourself and have paid attention, maybe you do know what it's like. But I would guess that a -10 is your stomach feels like it's sunken in. Your brain probably feels like it can't think. That would be my guess at a -10. So from a -10 to a +10, there are a lot of numbers. And what I want you to do is to think about where you might be when you start, if you know what a -10 is and what a +10 is. And then what our goal will be to start eating at a -2 and to stop eating at a +2. Now that is a lot different than this range of -10 to +10. There's a huge range there. But if you think about a -2 to a +2, it's not a very big range. And really, it's not a lot of food, which is so amazing when we first start this, that to bring ourselves up to a +2 does not take a lot of food to feel satisfied. What does a -2 feel like? I think a -2, now you know I've been using this term a lot, is like a whisper in your body. It's a whisper in your stomach that tells your mind that it's time to start doing something about food. It's time to start eating. And it's so light that it's easy to ignore if you've never paid attention to it. It's this whisper of hunger. Now, a +2 is also a whisper of fullness. If we're not used to paying attention to whispers in our body, it is very easy to ignore this, and it is very easy to think that you're still hungry. So this takes training, and this is where we're starting. That's why I always like to start with this physical hunger first before we get into the emotions, because I want you to be able to identify what this feels like for you. So for instance, for me, a -2 is really, there's no rumbling going on in my body, and I do not feel lightheaded. But I do maybe have a little bit of growling, maybe just a little bit. And I know that it's just time to do something. I know my stomach is asking me for something because I'm tuned into it now. But it was so easy when I was on Weight Watchers and I was counting points to ignore that -2. I could wait till a -6 easily. I wanted to be really hungry when I ate those points because I thought I deserved them. I would put a lot away for one meal, and I really wanted to enjoy it. And the most interesting thing to me about this point system that I used to use is that if you're eating 10 points at a meal sometimes, it goes way beyond a +2. But to me, I wanted to go beyond a +2. I wanted to feel really full. But a +2 is what I'm telling you now. It doesn't feel that full at all. It is a whisper of fullness. And a +6 is more like a screaming of fullness, right? We've got this whisper and screaming thing going on. And we're starting to pay attention to the whispers. So when you sit down to eat, you want to be at a -2, which means by the time you sit down, you may be feeling the -1 and starting to think about it a little bit. And then this -2, you're really sitting down to eat. And let me tell you the difference for me between eating at a -2 and eating at a -5. A -5, I'm definitely got some rumbling, some growling in my stomach. And I'm also starting to feel a little lightheaded. I might even be a little crabby. If I go to a restaurant and I'm at a -5 or a -6, say I'm going out for lunch, and we have this restaurant here in St. Louis called Companion, and they have the most beautiful baked goods, and they're all in the front window for everybody to see, and you see it as you're ordering your lunch. When I'm at a -5 or -6, you know what looks really good to me? The pretzel roll. That's what I want to eat. Why? Because I'm way too hungry to choose what is really good for my body, and my body is becoming compulsive. The urge is stronger, and my choices seem less. All right, let's talk about emotions. Now, the emotional hunger scale, of course, is about emotions, but here's some things I want you to know about emotions. Emotions are a vibration that live in your body, and they travel from your mind to your body. So first, your mind has to think something. Then it creates an emotional vibration that travels to your body. So basically, all emotions start in the mind. And like I said last time about our physical sensations like hunger, it starts in the body and it travels to the mind. So they're the exact opposite in terms of their pathways, but many times without awareness, they can feel very similar in the body, especially if they're screaming, if they're loud numbers, strong numbers. That's why I want you to be able to differentiate this. So let me give you an example of an emotion and how it works. The emotion anger. Your mind thinks something about a situation. For instance, your husband comes home late and he doesn't call. You think he should have called. That thought that you think he should have called creates this emotion called anger. And that emotional vibration will travel from your mind, from the thought that he should have called, and travel to your body where it can be felt. And for everybody, where that is different. So let me talk for myself so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. For me, when I get angry and I think a thought, what happens is my stomach tightens and my face feels flushed, especially like at a -8. This is highly exaggerated. So, I could feel like I have a fever. And my stomach feels so tight that I feel like I got punched. But that's at a -8. So if I were rating my emotional hunger or my emotion at that time, I would rate it at a -8. But anger can also be felt at less of an exaggerated feeling. So you could also feel anger at a -2. And a -2 for me, my face might be flushed just a little bit. And there would be a little grip in my stomach, but not very much. So that's more of a whisper, you could say, of anger. Very different from the whisper of anger and the screaming of anger. But either way, that feeling that I feel in my body is a vibration, and all the food in the world cannot make that vibration go away for good, right? But it is an uncomfortable feeling. The interesting thing about emotions, and because they travel from the mind to the body, that sometimes the body will feel these strong vibrations, but then the mind will come in, say with your husband, and say to you, oh, you're just overreacting. So that's just the mind talking. And we're going to get a lot more into thinking and what the mind does in later episodes. But for now, we're talking about the feeling, vibration that you can feel in your body, and that you're learning how to rate that feeling. That's all we're doing right now. But I want you to be thinking about how it starts in your mind first, because we're going to be doing a lot of work with the mind in future episodes. And so it's really important now that you just know that pathway. Let me ask you a question. If all emotions then end up somewhere in the body, and they always require some attention from you. What do you think might happen if you felt anger in your stomach like I explained about myself and you ignored it? Do you think that a piece of cake might help? I know that when we're talking very objectively and we're very intelligent about it right now, you would say to me, of course not, right? Because it's an emotion and food really can't help an emotion feel better. But it's interesting that in the moment of not being aware, it does feel like hunger and it does feel like you need something. And the interesting thing about eating is that it numbs a vibration. So if you don't like the feeling of anger and you don't want to deal with that, then you have also maybe taught yourself over time that numbing of vibration is a way of not feeling it, and eating has been the pathway of choice. That could possibly be what happens to you. Certainly happened to me and many of my clients that come in to see me. That's usually what they're doing. Is they're numbing a vibration in their body instead of dealing with it. They don't want to feel it. And there's no doubt about it that when you eat something, a strong vibration in your body numbs out. You could say you're numbing it. And I don't think that's a big surprise, but I love the idea of thinking of it as a vibration. I think that we have trained ourselves over time to confuse emotional hunger with physical hunger. And we've convinced ourselves that we're hungry when we're really emotionally hungry. And we're well equipped of feeding our emotional hunger, but we're not well equipped of feeding just our physical hunger. And that's really what this is all about, is understanding the difference, that emotions can't be fed with food, and physical sensations like hunger are the only thing that can be fed with food. Start filling yourself up with what you want, which is your own love and your own acceptance. So, with that being said, one of the other things that I like to talk about a lot when I talk about the thinner peace process is number one, to be able to eat between the twos. In other words, eat when you're hungry, a -2, and stop when you're full, which is at a +2. And you can always go back to the beginning podcast if you are not familiar with what I'm talking about. You can go to the first 5 podcasts where I explain the process in detail of how I came up with these twos and what it means. But for you, if you're just listening for the first time, just know that we're starting with the idea of eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. And if you're in menopause, one of the things that I talk a lot about is the idea that our appetites decrease over time from the time we're 20 to the time we're 50. Our metabolism goes down, the amount of calories, how much we can handle lessens, and our appetite decreases because our appetite is dependent on our metabolism when everything is connected properly. And in menopause, or when you're in your 50s, which is usually the time, your appetite's been decreasing for a while now. Some people notice this. And certainly as I'm older than in my 50s now, I can tell you my appetite has decreased a lot since I was 50. I just don't eat as much and don't want to eat as much and don't want to eat as often. And I think it's just this connection with my body that our bodies need less, but our bodies also need nutritious food, which is another thing that I talk about when I talk about the types of eating. So in my process, the thinner peace process, I love the name thinner peace because I want you to get thinner, but I want you to do it in a peaceful way. And I want you to be at peace with your body and at peace with food and be at peace with the scale, is that when you have this thinner peace, you also have to use your brain to know why you're doing what you're doing when you're putting food into your mouth. And the way I explain that is that there's 4 types of eating. The first type I call fuel eating.
And fuel eating is basically when you're choosing nutritious food for your body. Now, when I say nutritious food, according to you and your educated mind, and I think everybody has their own idea of nutritious foods. Unless you're following an external diet plan, then maybe the diet plan is telling you what these nutritious foods are. But for most of the people that I work with, I think they know what these foods are. But what I wanted to talk to you about today about this is that a lot of times we just aren't very truthful and honest with ourselves with the types of food that we're choosing. So, nutritious food or fuel food is one type of eating. The second type of eating is joy eating. And a joy eat or joy eating is when you're eating non-nutritious food, but you're doing it very mindful, bite by bite. So it's not about hunger and fullness. It is about enjoyment and being very, very mindful about that enjoyment. And I think the way that it looks as you get good and practice at joy eating is that you don't eat a lot, but you enjoy it a lot. And you know you can always have it again. So you don't feel like you have to overeat it or fog it, which is the third type of eating. So fog eating is either when you're eating a joy food and it's not mindful and you're just eating a lot of it or you're binging it, but you're not really using the food for enjoyment of the taste. You may be using it for an emotional reason, try to make yourself feel better, which is never a good reason with a non-nutritious food or a joy eat. Use it for the enjoyment of how it tastes. But if you're not doing it that way, then you're fog eating, which is the third type of eating that I talk about. You can fuel fog eat, which means that you're eating nutritious food for your body, but you're eating beyond a +2. That is not what you want to be doing, but that's what you might be noticing for a while, is that you're choosing fuel food, but because you think it's quote unquote healthy, then you don't pay attention to your own hunger scale and you end up overeating. Overeating usually will lead to too much weight on your body for you. The scale will reflect it. Your clothes will reflect it. And it's because you're not paying close attention to your body saying start and stop. So part of the thinner peace process is getting very good at knowing when you're hungry and knowing when you're full and really understanding what that feels like in your body. And the fourth type of eating is storm eating or binge eating. And that's when you're eating way beyond +2s, or you're joy eating and you're eating a quantity, a lot of food, not just a little. Fogging can be a little bit of food. You can go from a +2 to a +3. That would be a fog. But storm eating is probably you would be at a much stronger number and probably feel sick. I hear a lot of people say that they eat so much they feel sick. That would be more of a storm eat.
I am a woman who is powerful to make changes in my life. I am a woman who is self-aware. Those kind of thoughts create feelings of empowerment around anything, including food. And speaking of emotions, I think one of the hardest emotions for most women to feel is anger. So I really do. I have more clients that eat their anger than any other emotion. Sadness is probably the next one, but anger is really a big one because I think in our culture, we're taught early on that it's not polite to get angry. But hey, anger is an emotion. Anger is something that you feel, I feel, that we all feel, and it really serves a purpose. So I want you to be okay with feeling anger, or at least knowing that you're feeling it. Because I think for a lot of us, we want to pretend like we're not angry when we are. We want to resist it. And resisting anger, I think, is what leads to overeating and binging. You cannot eat your anger. So let me give you an example of one of my clients and her anger issues and how she dealt with it with food. You all have been working with me and you all know about food journals. You also know the types of eating, and we're talking about storm eating, and we're talking about binge eating, and we're talking about fog eating today, right? Fog eating is like overeating, binge eating is storm eating. And with this client, she came to me for one of our sessions with her food journals, and she said to me, I'm not sure if this was a storm eat or this was a fog eat. So I would really like to go over this episode with you, is what she said to me. And I'm going over it in this episode with you now. So she gives me her food journal, and basically the way it happened is her day up until 5 o'clock is she was fuel eating on a regular basis, and she was eating between the twos. Then around 5 o'clock, she went to meet a friend, and she had a couple of wine spritzers and some appetizers. And she told me she was a little hungry when she went, like she was a -1, but she ended up like at about a +3. She said it was fuel eating, but really when we looked at the foods, what I said to her is really this is just a total joy eat. Wine is joy, and the appetizers really weren't nutritious. They were basically joy foods. So I said, let's just call this a joy meal and a fog meal, because she overate and she didn't eat anything for fuel. So we stopped there, and then she told me about her next meal, which was about 7 o'clock. She went out with a friend for dinner, and basically, to make a long story short, she had some fuel food, so she called it a fuel meal, but she overate and she also had more joy food. So we would call this meal a fuel meal, a joy meal, and a fog meal. And you can have all those types of eating in one meal. And I'll show you how we looked at it. So she started, I think, like at a -1 again, and ended up at about a +4. So this was at about 7 o'clock. She said then she went home, and around 9 o'clock, she had 2 pieces of gooey butter cake and 3 or 4 rolls. And so she looks at me and she said, what do you think about this? And I said to her, what do you think about this? Because I usually like to put the question right back on you. What do you think about this? But what I want to tell you, my listener right now, who is observing this food journal with me, is that the way my client handled this is that she really had a lot of curiosity and compassion, right? When she came back to talk to me about this, I could tell she just had a kind of a smile on her face, and she was just so curious because she couldn't quite figure out why she was doing what she was doing and actually what to call it. This is where we started. I said to her, and I would say to you, what was going on during your day? Now, here's the interesting thing. What was going on with her during the day is that she saw her lawyer, and there's actually something going on in her life right now that really makes her angry in dealing with this lawyer. And I don't have to go into all the details with you about this. The only thing I want to tell you about it is that she was basically mad. And what she said to me, she says, you know what? I guess I was a little mad all day. She said, a little mad. And I said, well, like, are you sure you weren't a lot mad? And she said, well, actually, I might have been. She says, I just don't like to get angry. And I said, but you were. See, this is the interesting thing, is that we don't think we should feel a feeling that we're feeling. What I said to her is, it's okay. So what? You were angry. What's wrong with that? She didn't like the way things were going. And there's a lot of ways that you can look at that. So you can look at your thinking. What was she thinking? And she was thinking things about this that she just thought was ridiculous. And it was just making her angry that she even had to do it. But then once we started looking at it, I said, what if you just allowed that anger to come through and just felt it and said that it was okay to feel it?
Of course, I would never, ever end. Please, when you're through listening to this podcast, wherever you go and whatever you do, please, please, please be very, very kind to yourself. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
If you're loving my podcast and you would like some more information to be able to follow along with, then please go to drdebbutler.com/change and you can get a free copy of my companion book that goes with this podcast that I refer to in many different episodes. That is drdebbutler.com/change. CHANGE.